to be making macaroni cheese. So we're going to be continuing with our sauce making lesson from last week where we looked at the all-in-one method. Today you're going to be writing out your instructions, same as you did for the last practical, and we're going to be doing it today. So I want you to make sure that you are constantly looking at that success criteria to make sure that you are doing things to your best ability on this. Writing the instructions isn't literally just copying what I'm doing, it's adding details. It's talking about the health and safety. It's going into the reasons why. So why do I do things, okay? There is a reason behind every ingredient, every process, no matter what, okay? So first things first, make sure that you've got your template laid out. Pause this if you need it to. If not, don't worry. But what we are going to do first, we're going to do our equipment. So first things first, remember my equipment might look slightly differently to what we use at school, but the equipment is still the same, okay? So first thing, today we're going to need 2 saucepans. That is 2 saucepans. So I've got 2 very different saucepans, okay? So then you can definitely see the difference between what I'm doing. For each of those saucepans, you will need a wooden spoon. So that means I've got 2 wooden spoons, okay? We will need our set of scales, we will need a measuring jug, a grater, and our measuring spoons, please, okay? All of this will make sense as we go through it, so do not worry. On top of everything else, we will also need 1 small bowl, okay? So that's 2 saucepans, 2 wooden spoons, scales, measuring jug, measuring spoons, grater, and a small bowl. Obviously, when we're in school, we will also have our pan stands so we can move our saucepans to our tables, okay? So today, the ingredients that we need, it is quite simple. Our first ingredient that we need to get prepared is our pasta. So you can use any pasta. So today I'm using tube pasta, okay? So this is called penne. Obviously, if we're making traditional macaroni cheese, you would use macaroni pasta, okay? I'm going to do a double recipe, okay? So I want you to work out what half is of everything I do, okay? And obviously this way, then you'll be able to prove that you have listened and actually done every task properly. So I'm doing a double recipe, you need to do a single. Obviously, if at home you're wanting to make this and wanting to do enough for more than just 2 people, you will need to obviously do the maths. So I'm going to be cooking for 2, so I'm doing a double recipe. So firstly, the pasta, I need 200 grams of pasta. Okay, so there I have got my 200 grams of pasta. What I'm then going to do is I'm going to apply water to my pasta. I do warm water from the tap. The reason why I do this is in the time that it takes my pasta to cook, everything will be ready at the end. So warm water into our pasta. With this water, you want to fill it to about halfway. So you can see there, I've done mine just under halfway on my saucepan. At which point you'll place it onto your saucepan, onto the hob, and you are going to place this at a high heat. So obviously at school, this is a temperature 5 or 6. Obviously, if you've got a gas cooker at home, it will be slightly different. Okay, so I've now turned my dial, so my pasta is here and it is turned on, starting to get ready now. Into that water, obviously, you can apply a little bit of salt if you want to at home. I say you don't need to because there is going to be enough salt content in our cheese sauce to do everything, okay? So the next thing that we need to do is we are going to need to make sure that we have measured our milk, okay? So I'm going to be measuring 600 millilitres of milk, which I have already done. Okay, so there is my 600 millilitres of milk measured into my measuring jug. Into my small bowl, I'm going to be measuring plain flour. Okay, so we don't want any self-raising flour or anything like that. So plain flour, okay? So my plain flour, I'm going to be measuring 40 grams of this, okay? So remember, we need to turn my scales onto 0 so that we don't measure too much or too little, okay? So 40 grams of flour, okay? So I'm nearly there, that's 38, 39 and 40. We want this to be as close to exact as possible, please, okay? So once you have measured your flour, you are then going to measure your butter, okay? So your butter is going to be measured straight into one of your saucepans. So you can see this is not the same saucepan as what my pasta was in. Okay, so you're going to measure the same amount of butter as you did flour. So in my case, I'm going to be measuring 40 grams, okay? It does not matter the type of butter you use. It can be margarine, it can be proper butter. It does not matter, okay? Obviously, if you're wanting to make this suitable for a dietary requirement, you would just adapt your ingredients, okay? So scales onto 0. I'm going to be measuring in my butter. Oh, that's too much. So you can see I'm just using my spoon to scrape some out to get it as close as possible, okay? Obviously, in this, we always start a practical the same way. So we will have always started by getting ourselves ready. So hands washed, hair up, everything like that. Okay, so it's my 40 grams of butter measured into my saucepan now. Okay, so we've got our flour measured, our butter measured, our pasta measured, and our milk. Okay, so that means everything is now ready. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to transfer this saucepan onto our cooker. Okay, so obviously with mine, I've got a little movable one so that you can see what I'm doing. Okay, so here you can just see in the camera over here, I've got my pasta on. Obviously it's not bubbling yet because it's not fully hot. You can see the water starting to go cloudy because the water is starting to get the pasta starch on. Okay, so here now you can see my saucepan. I'm going to put this on a medium heat. So obviously on an electric it's between 3 and 4. On a gas you'd have to work out roughly what is half a flame. So it's not a full flame, but it has still got a bit of a flame in it. Okay, so I'm going to be doing this until my butter is completely melted. Obviously you can see here I have got some very, very big pieces of butter. Okay, obviously those bigger pieces might take longer to melt than the smaller pieces. So what I'm going to do is I am actually going to take that bigger piece and I'm going to break it up into a couple of pieces. That way my butter will melt a little bit quicker because I've got more surface area. So you can see I'm not stirring it, I'm just letting it melt. Okay, it can take a little bit for it to finish melting properly, but you just have to bear with it, okay? While this is being done, what I am doing off camera is I'm measuring in my mustard into my flour. So I have used 2 teaspoons of mustard there. So obviously you're using a single recipe, not a double, so do the maths. Okay, so it's just standard, simple mustard. Okay. What I am going to be doing then is I'm going to be adding in salt and pepper, okay? So for the salt and pepper, it's just 2 pinches of each for your double recipe, okay? So you're going to add in your salt and pepper as well as the mustard onto that flour, okay? It's nice and simple, doesn't take very long, okay? So what I did is I ground my salt and my pepper into my hand, and I basically literally I just grabbed my hand, I took a pinch and transferred it into the bowl. Okay, then I'm going to use any utensil. Normally I use my measuring spoon that I used to measure it. Okay, and you're going to stir all that together, and you will see you can barely even see the mustard and salt in there. That's how you know there is really not a lot. Okay, so my butter is getting there, it's nearly melted, so you can see I'm making sure that all the pieces are broken up to help with the melting process. Okay, so you're going to keep melting it, stirring it around as needed, but we're not going to waste loads of time. Obviously, we should remember from our previous lesson what the functions are for our ingredients. So make sure in your instructions you are stating why we need those ingredients, okay? So why do we need the pasta? Why do we need the flour? Why do we need the butter, etc.? Okay? So you need to make sure that all of this is fully melted. We're getting there now, almost done. My pasta is now starting to steam a little bit. That means it's starting to get quite hot and warm now. So we're getting there. You just literally, like you can see, you just have to bear with it, okay? Cooking does not happen instantaneously. Obviously, if you're doing a single recipe, this would have mostly been melted by now, okay? So you can see in mine now, I've got a couple of big lumps left, but not many. Okay, so we're nearly done. Okay, there we go. That is the last bit of my butter now melted. So you can see that is a complete liquid. What I need to do now is I need to turn my dial so that I am on the minimum heat. I've not removed the heat, but I've made it as small as possible. The reason why is so I can put in all of my flour. So you can see there I'm scraping the bowl, making sure every bit is out. So I've scraped out all of my flour and the seasonings, okay? So we're going to stir all that together. So you can see the butter and the flour mixing together. So we learnt about gelatinisation last week, okay? The reason why is during your instructions, I am wanting you to state what part of the gelatinisation process is it at which point, okay? So you can see here, I have mixed in all my flour and all my butter now, and it has created this, like, dough kind of consistency. This is what the actual roux is called, okay? So this is what the roux is, okay? So you can see there, I've got my roux all made, all flour, all mixed in now, ready for the next step. So what we're going to do now is we're going to pour in our milk. We're not going to pour it all in at one time. So you'll see that I've still got lots of milk left in my jug. So I've just poured in a little bit. You need to allow the milk to heat up because obviously it's not going to heat up when it's a different temperature. But it's not going to soak in when it's a different temperature to the rest is what I mean. Okay, so we're going to soak that all in. And you will see that the actual mixture starts to thicken and condense into itself, okay? So we need to be making sure that we're keeping an eye on this. Obviously, we don't need to stir it constantly, but we do need to make sure we're keeping a close eye on it, okay? So what I'm going to do now, while this is doing this, I pre-measured 150 grams of cheese. So that is enough for my double recipe. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to be taking the grater that I have at home and I'm going to grate it all. Obviously, if I get to a point where I think, actually, I need to stir my cheese sauce, it's simple. You just stop grating for a second, pop it down, go back to your saucepan and give it a stir, okay? So you can be grating the cheese while you're doing this whole process. Okay, you could grate it in advance if you wanted to, but it is your personal choice, okay? So I can see there my milk is starting to change colour slightly, and that is because my actual mustard and all that flour and that butter mixture is starting to combine with the two, okay? So obviously it's heating up. Obviously every time we add more milk, it's going to cool back down again, okay? If you think you are very competent at making sure that you can do this one little bit at a time, you can continue using your spoon. If you think, actually, no, I'm going to get stuck, I'm going to end up with loads of lumps in my sauce and it's going to go all wrong, obviously you shouldn't if you know what you were doing, but you can use a whisk. Okay, obviously using your whisk means that you've got more surface area covered at a time. Because you will see here is I'm making sure I'm stirring every single bit of my saucepan, okay? So I'm stirring each bit. I'm not just stirring around the sides. I'm making sure I'm going like a crosshatch, like you do in art. So a crosshatch pattern to make sure that I cover all of that saucepan, okay? So you can see, obviously, it can take quite a while for everything to get thicker and go through that gelatinisation process. But it's because, obviously, we've got to hit those temperatures that were discussed in that video from the other teacher from a different school, okay? So we're We are keeping stirring, making sure that it's going nicely, making sure that it is getting thickened as we go. You will see how sometimes I'm pressing any of those big lumps across the side of the saucepan. That is so that we can get rid of those lumps, okay? And that is how you can fix that problem if it should occur, okay? So we're going to keep stirring. We're going to make sure that we are not going to let any bit get stuck at the bottom of that saucepan, okay? Obviously, if you need to take a rest from stirring, that is fine, but you need to keep an eye on it. If your milk starts to bubble, that means the milk is going to start boiling. That is what we do not want. We do not want it to boil, okay? Because at the end of the day, flour is not meant to bubble and boil. Flour is for cooking, okay? And for combining and thickening the whole process. So we do not want that to go wrong, okay? So you can see there, it's starting to thicken slightly. Okay, I've still got quite a lot of lumps. Obviously, if you found that you were struggling to get rid of these lumps, remember to use your whisk, okay? Because your whisk, at the end of the day, has all these separate parts to it, which means it can cover more surface at a time, like I've already said, okay? And it's a bit easier to stir with a whisk, some people might find. So you can see here, I'm covering all the surfaces, scraping around the edges. I'm not leaving any space unmixed. Okay, so you can see there, most of my lumps have gone just from doing that couple of seconds using a whisk, okay? So the whole process of this is to make sure that it heats up to the correct temperature, okay? So with this correct temperature, we learned what they were and we learned what each thing should be happening at a time, okay? So at this point, it's not thick, but most of it has started combining. I can't really see my butter or flour mixture anymore, okay? So I can't see the roux. At this point, I'm going to add in the rest of my milk, okay? And I'm going to allow that to heat up. Obviously, we know which temperatures things need to be for the gelatinisation process to complete, okay? So we're going to make sure that we are stirring this consistently. We're going to make sure that this is getting nice and warm, because at the moment it is really cold, because obviously I've just chucked in all of that milk, okay? And that milk is very cold. So now what I'm going to do, because it's still on a low heat, I'm actually going to turn it up to a number 5 for me. So it's not at the highest heat, but it is quite high, okay? With this, you need to make sure that you are stirring it. You are being consistent all the way through. You need to make sure that it is getting no lumps. So I can see in here now, I've got no lumps in my mixture that I can see. Okay. At this point is you will start to ever so often see the odd thicker piece, and that is because the heat at the bottom of the saucepan, because the heat is coming up, remember, so that heat is going to actually thicken the whole mixture, okay? So you might just be able to see in the corner of the screen, I am actually stirring my pasta now, okay? So I'm making sure that nothing is getting stuck to the bottom. I'm not just focusing on one thing at a time, okay? So I'm going back to my cheese sauce now, because I saw that there was a lot of butter at the top because there was that yellow colour. So I've stirred it back into the rest, okay? Making sure I'm scraping the sides so nothing gets stuck, okay? At this point, you can take things further. Obviously, you could do this so it could create a better meal. So, for example, what I'm going to be doing with mine after I've recorded the video is I'm going to be creating basically a cheesy version of a carbonara. So I'm going to be putting some bits of bacon and onion into my macaroni cheese, okay? And this way, then it's good for a whole meal. Obviously, if it was just for lunch or as a side to a meal, this would be perfect as it is when it is done, okay? But obviously, because I'm wanting it as a whole meal, I'm going to make sure that everything is cooked together, okay? So obviously, I'd take my frying pan and I'd cook things off to one side. You could do this at school, but you would need to make sure that everything you brought in was ready-made, because obviously I know you can use raw meat now. You will have shown me at this point in school that you can cook things like chicken, okay? And at that point, that is when I know you can be trusted doing things. Obviously, if you are wanting to take your recipe further, bring in extra ingredients, that's fine. But you would need to make sure that you are using your time management. And if you're thinking, oh, I could do the same as what Miss is doing, I'm going to add a bit of bacon or some chicken to it, that's fine. But I would recommend trying your time management skills first, okay? Because I only give you an hour of time to cook, okay? Same as we always did last year when we were able to cook, okay? So we're going to only have an hour to do everything. This itself can take about half an hour. But obviously, on top of that, you've got to make sure that you allow time for things like washing up, preparation. Obviously, this video is not going to be an hour long, and that is because, obviously, I got some things pre-prepared. So, obviously, my pasta, I had it out ready. My milk was pre-measured. My cheese was pre-measured, okay? And obviously, the more you do it, the better you get with your time management skills. And that is fine. It is okay for you to get better because at the end of the day, nobody is born with skills. Everybody takes time to get there, okay? So we need to make sure that we are getting this nice and hot, okay? So you might be able to start hearing a little bit of a ticky noise, okay? And that is the heat coming through my metal stove of it actually starting to heat up all of my pans now. So my pasta is proper steaming and starting to bubble away. Okay, I wonder if I can move it slightly so you can see. Hang on. So you can see there, hopefully, that I've got my pasta starting to bubble a little bit. Not a lot, but just a little bit. You can see it ever so often. Okay? And that is good. That is what you want. We do not want to stop it at that point, because if we stop it at that point, the pasta will not absorb the water. Okay? Right, so we're going to keep making sure that this is getting thicker as we go, okay? So my pan is still quite cold up here, and obviously that means that the milk is not going to be hot yet, okay? So therefore, the whole process is not done, okay? So I'm going to stop this video, and I want you to make sure that you get all of the instructions wrote to this point, and then I want you to play the second video, so the second part, which is demonstrating for you near the end. So I'm skipping ahead from this bit until it is actually thick, okay? So make sure you get that done and come back and watch the second part.